The snow fell in thick curtains across the Wyoming Territory that January morning in 1878, and Gabriel Sterling thought he'd seen the last living soul 2 days ago when he'd left El Dorado Canyon behind. He guided his horse through the white wasteland with his head bent against the wind, following the trail that would take him to the trading post near the Montana border, when something made him pull on the reins. There in the snow, barely visible beneath a dusting of fresh powder, lay what looked like a bundle of dark fabric, but as he drew closer, his heart lurched. It was a woman. Gabriel dismounted quickly, his boots crunching through the frozen crust. He dropped to his knees beside her, brushing snow from her face with hands already numb from the cold. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with dark hair matted against her pale cheeks. Her lips held a bluish tint that told him she didn't have much time left. Her dress was torn, inadequate for this weather, and when he pressed his fingers to her throat searching for a pulse, he found one so faint it barely registered. He shook her gently. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, dark lashes heavy with ice crystals. When her eyes opened, they were the color of warm honey, though clouded with pain and exhaustion. She looked at him without recognition, without hope. "I'm going to get you somewhere warm," Gabriel said, already shrugging out of his heavy coat. "You're going to be all right." Her lips moved, forming words so quiet he had to lean down to hear them. "I'm not worth saving." The words hit him like a physical blow. He stared at her, this stranger who'd given up on herself, and felt something fierce awaken in his chest. "Well, I disagree," he said firmly. "And since I'm the one doing the saving, I reckon my opinion's the one that counts right now." She tried to speak again, but he was already wrapping her in his coat, lifting her carefully. She weighed almost nothing, and that worried him more than the cold. He'd seen people starve before, seen what desperation could do to a body. Whatever had brought her out here, whatever had left her lying in the snow waiting to die, it wasn't something that had happened overnight. Gabriel secured her on his horse, then climbed up behind her, holding her against his chest. She was limp in his arms, unconscious again, and he urged his mount forward with more urgency than before. There was a lined shack he'd passed about 3 miles back, a small shelter used by ranch hands during roundup season. It would be empty this time of year, but it would have walls and a stove, and that was all he needed. The ride back seemed to take forever. The wind howled around them, trying to tear them from the saddle, and Gabriel hunched over the woman, using his body to shield her from the worst of it. He talked to his horse, to her, to himself, anything to keep focused on the task at hand rather than the very real possibility that she might die before he could get her warm. When the shack finally appeared through the snow, Gabriel almost wept with relief. He half fell from the saddle, still holding the woman, and kicked the door open. Inside was dark and cold, but it was shelter. He laid her on the narrow cot against the wall, then set about building a fire in the small stove with hands that shook from cold and urgency. The kindling caught quickly, and soon flames were licking up around the larger pieces of wood he'd found stacked beside the stove. Heat began to fill the small space, and Gabriel turned his attention back to the woman. Her breathing was shallow, her skin still far too pale. He knew about cold, about what happened when a body got too chilled. You couldn't warm someone up too fast, or their heart might give out, but you couldn't leave them cold either. He pulled the rough wool blankets from the cot and wrapped them around her, then set about removing her wet boots. Her feet were like ice, the skin frighteningly white. He rubbed them gently, trying to restore circulation, and was relieved when he saw pink begin to return to her toes. No black yet, no frostbite that he could see. Gabriel found his canteen and tried to get some water past her lips. Most of it dribbled down her chin, but some made it into her mouth, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed reflexively. It was something, at least. For the next several hours, Gabriel tended to her like she was the most important thing in the world. He kept the fire going, kept rubbing warmth back into her hands and feet, tried to get more water into her. He talked to her even though she couldn't hear him, told her about himself, about the ranch he worked, about his plans for the future. "My name's Gabriel Sterling," he said, sitting on the edge of the cot as night fell outside. "Folks call me Gabe. I've been working cattle for the last 6 years, saving up to buy my own spread. Got a piece of land picked out near El Dorado Canyon. It's in Wyoming Territory. Good grazing, plenty of water. Been dreaming about it for so long I can see every blade of grass in my mind." The woman's eyelids fluttered again, and this time when they opened, there was more awareness in her gaze. She looked at him for a long moment, confusion and fear warring in her expression. "You're safe," Gabriel said quickly. "I found you in the snow. We're in a lined shack, just temporary until the storm passes. Then I'll get you to a proper doctor." "Why?" Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from cold and disuse. "Why what? Why did you help me?" Gabriel frowned. "Why wouldn't I? You needed help." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her temples into her hair. "You should have left me there." "Not likely," Gabriel said. "Now, can you tell me your name?" She was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen back asleep. Then quietly, Marianne Jenkins." "Well, Miss Jenkins, I'm glad to know you. Can you tell me what happened? How you came to be out there?" Her expression shuddered and she turned her face away from him. "I don't want to talk about it." Gabriel nodded slowly. "All right, that's all right, but I need to know if you're hurt anywhere besides the cold. Are you injured?" "I'm tired," she whispered. "So tired." "I know, you can sleep." "I'll keep watch, keep the fire going. You're safe here, I promise you that." She looked at him again, studying his face with an intensity that made him self-conscious. He knew what she'd see. A man of 25 with sun-weathered skin, brown hair that needed cutting, gray eyes that his mother had always said were too serious. Nothing special, nothing that would inspire trust, but he hoped she could see he meant what he said. "Thank you," Marianne finally said, so quietly he almost missed it. Then her eyes closed and her breathing evened out into sleep. Gabriel sat back, releasing a breath he hadn't known he was holding. She was going to make it. He could see color returning to her face, could see the steady rise and fall of her chest. Whatever had brought her to that frozen trail, whatever had made her believe she wasn't worth saving, at least he'd managed to keep her alive. He stood and went to check on his horse, which he'd brought into the small attached lean-to. The animal was fine, munching on the hay Gabriel had found stored there. He gave the horse water from the pump outside, breaking through the ice that had formed over the spout, then returned to the shack. The storm continued to rage outside, and Gabriel knew they'd be stuck here for at least another day, maybe 2. That was fine. It would give Marianne time to recover some strength before they had to travel. He settled into the single chair by the stove, wrapped himself in his coat, and prepared for a long night of watching over a woman whose story he didn't know but whose life had somehow become tangled with his own. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, the wind howled louder and the snow fell thicker. Gabriel woke stiff and cold from sleeping in the chair, immediately checking on Marianne. She still slept, but her color was much better, and when he felt her forehead, he was relieved to find it cool but not cold. He went outside briefly to tend to his horse, and to fill his canteen with fresh snow to melt for water. The cold bit through his clothes in seconds, and he hurried back inside, shaking snow from his hair and shoulders. When he turned around, he found Marianne awake, watching him with those honey-colored eyes. "Good morning," he said, trying to keep his voice gentle, non-threatening. "How are you feeling?" "Cold," she said. "But better. Less like I'm dying." "That's good. That's real good." He crossed to the stove, adding more wood to the fire. "I've got some jerky and hardtack in my saddlebag. It's not much, but it's something." "When's the last time you ate?" Marianne's expression became distant. "I don't remember. Days, maybe." Gabriel retrieved the food and brought it to her, along with his canteen full of water. She struggled to sit up and he helped her, propping the thin pillow behind her back. She took the jerky with trembling hands and nibbled at it slowly. "Easy," Gabriel cautioned. "Your stomach's going to need time to adjust." She nodded but continued eating, and he was glad to see it. After a few minutes, she paused and looked at him. "You said your name was Gabriel." "That's right. Gabriel Sterling, but you can call me Gabe." "Where are we exactly, Gabe?" "Wyoming Territory, about 15 miles south of the Montana border. I was heading up to a trading post when I found you. This is a lined shack for the Triple Bar Ranch. We use it during spring roundup, but it's empty this time of year." "You work there, at the Triple Bar?" "I do. Been there 6 years now, like I said. Good outfit, fair boss." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Miss Jenkins, I don't mean to pry, but I need to know if someone's looking for you, if you're in some kind of trouble." Her hands tightened on the jerky, and he saw fear flash across her face. "No one's looking for me. No one cares where I am." "Someone must care. Your family." "I don't have family." The words came out flat, final. "Not anymore." Gabriel wanted to press, to understand, but he could see she was shutting down again. "All right. When the storm clears, I'll take you to El Dorado Canyon. There's a decent doctor there, and the sheriff's a good man. He can help you figure out what to do next." "I don't need a sheriff," Marianne said quickly, almost desperately. "Please, I don't need law involved." "Are you running from the law?" "No, I just—" She closed her eyes, and he saw her struggle with whatever demons haunted her. "I just want to be left alone. I want to disappear." "Well, you nearly managed that," Gabriel said, his tone sharper than he intended. "Another hour in that snow and you would have gotten your wish." She flinched, and immediately he felt guilty. "I'm sorry. That was harsh. It's just that I don't understand why someone would give up like that, why someone would think they weren't worth saving." Marianne set the jerky aside, her appetite apparently gone. "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." "Then tell me." "No." They sat in tense silence, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the howl of wind outside. Finally, Gabriel sighed. "All right, you don't have to tell me anything, but you do have to let me help you. Once the storm passes, I'm taking you to El Dorado Canyon and you're going to see that doctor. After that, what you do is your own business." "Fair." Marianne looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair." The rest of the day passed slowly. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and they were trapped together in the small space. Gabriel tried to give Marianne privacy when he could, turning his back when she needed to use the chamber pot he'd found in the corner, stepping outside into the brutal cold when she wanted to change position on the cot. But mostly they existed in an awkward silence, two strangers thrown together by circumstance. As evening approached, Gabriel made a thin stew from jerky and melted snow, seasoned with some salt he had in his pack. It wasn't much, but it was hot, and Marianne ate it gratefully. He noticed she had better control of her hands now, less trembling. Good signs, all of them. "Tell me about El Dorado Canyon," Marianne said suddenly, surprising him. "What's it like?" Gabriel settled back in his chair, grateful for the conversation. "It's small, maybe 300 people. Got a main street with a general store, saloon, hotel, church, and a handful of other businesses. The canyon itself is beautiful, red rock walls that glow like fire at sunset. There's a creek runs through it, never runs dry even in the worst summers. It sounds peaceful." "It is, mostly." We get the occasional trouble like any town, but nothing too bad. Folks tend to look out for each other." He paused. "I think you'd like it there. It's the kind of place where a person could make a fresh start if they needed to." Marianne's eyes met his, and he saw understanding dawn there. "Is that what you think I need? A fresh start?" "I don't know what you need, Miss Jenkins, but I know everybody deserves a second chance, no matter what they've done or what's been done to them." She looked away, her throat working as she swallowed hard. "You're a good man, Gabriel Sterling." "I try to be." That night, Gabriel gave Marianne the cot and made himself as comfortable as he could in the chair with his coat wrapped around him. He woke several times to feed the fire, and each time he checked on her, making sure she was still breathing, still improving. Each time he found her sleeping peacefully, and each time he felt that strange protective feeling grow stronger in his chest. He didn't understand it. He'd known this woman for barely a day, knew almost nothing about her, and yet he felt connected to her in a way that defied explanation. Maybe it was just the circumstances, the intimacy of the situation. Or maybe it was something more, something that had started the moment he'd seen her lying in that snow and decided, without hesitation, that her life was worth saving even if she didn't believe it herself. The storm finally broke on the second morning. Gabriel woke to silence, the absence of wind so profound it was almost eerie. He stood stiffly, his body protesting after 2 nights in the chair, and looked out the small window. The world outside was buried in snow, pristine and white under a clearing sky. "Is it over?" Marianne's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her sitting up on the cot, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked better, much better, though still far too thin and worn. "It is. We'll be able to travel today, though it'll be slow going through all this snow." Something like disappointment crossed her face, there and gone so quickly he almost missed it. "All right, I'm ready when you are." But before they could leave, Gabriel needed to know more. He crossed to the cot and sat on the edge, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Marianne, before we go, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." She tensed, her hands gripping the blanket. "What? Are you in danger? Is someone going to be looking for you?" "Because if you are, if someone is, I need to know what we're riding into." Marianne was quiet for a long time, her gaze fixed on her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "My husband is dead. He died 3 months ago." Gabriel felt something cold settle in his stomach. Not because she'd been married, but because of the way she said it, with no grief, only a kind of exhausted relief. "I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be." The words came out bitter. "He was not a good man. He bought me from my father when I was 17, paid him like I was livestock. For 3 years he made my life hell. When he died, I thought I was finally free, but then his brother came. Said I was his now, said the law would back him up since we had no children and I had no property of my own." Gabriel felt anger rise in him, hot and fierce. "That's not legal. A woman can't be owned." "Can't she?" Marianne looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "I had no money, no family who cared, no proof of anything he did to me. His brother was worse than he was, meaner, so I ran, took what I could carry and I ran. But it was winter and I had nowhere to go and I was so tired. I just wanted it to be over." "So you walked out into the snow?" She nodded. "I thought it would be peaceful, just falling asleep and not waking up, better than what would happen if they found me." Gabriel reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and covered her hand with his. She didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared at their joined hands like she couldn't quite believe what she was seeing. "No one's going to hurt you again. I promise you that. We'll go to El Dorado Canyon and we'll figure this out. The sheriff there, Tom Reeves, he's a fair man. He won't let anyone take you against your will." "You don't understand how these things work," Marianne said, but there was hope in her voice, fragile and tentative. Men like my husband's brother, they don't care about what's right, they take what they want. Not in my town, they don't. Gabriel squeezed her hand gently, then released it. Trust me, please. Marianne searched his face, looking for something he hoped she found. Finally, she nodded. All right. I'll trust you, Gabriel Sterling. Don't make me regret it. I won't. I swear it. They prepared to leave, Gabriel packing up his meager supplies while Marianne wrapped herself in all the blankets he could spare. His coat was too big on her, swallowing her small frame, but it was warm, and that was what mattered. He helped her outside, steadying her when her legs proved unsteady after days of lying down. The horse eyed them both dubiously as Gabriel helped Marianne into the saddle, then swung up behind her. She settled against him naturally, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her secure. She was so small in his arms, so fragile, and yet he'd seen the strength in her, the will that had kept her alive through 3 years of hell. The ride to El Dorado Canyon took most of the day. The snow made travel slow and treacherous, and Gabriel had to dismount several times to lead the horse through particularly deep drifts. Marianne dozed against him, exhausted from even this small amount of activity, and he let her sleep, keeping her safe in the circle of his arms. They reached the edge of town as the sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in shades of crimson and gold. Marianne stirred, looking around with wide eyes. It's beautiful, she breathed. Just like you said. Wait until spring, Gabriel said. The wildflowers come up everywhere, purple and yellow and white. Prettiest thing you ever saw. He guided the horse down the main street, aware of the curious looks they were getting. El Dorado Canyon was small enough that a stranger was news, especially a woman riding double with one of the local ranch hands. He ignored the stares and headed straight for Doc Morrison's house at the end of the street. The doctor answered Gabriel's knock quickly, his weathered face creasing with concern when he saw Marianne. What happened? Found her half frozen a few days ago, Gabriel explained. She's been eating and drinking, seems to be recovering, but I wanted you to check her over proper. Doc Morrison stepped aside, ushering them in. His wife, a kindly woman named Sarah, appeared from the kitchen and immediately took charge of Marianne, clucking over her like a mother hen. Gabriel found himself dismissed to the parlor while the women took Marianne to a back room for examination. He paced the small space, unable to settle, until Doc Morrison emerged 20 minutes later. She'll be fine, he said. Thin as a rail and exhausted, but no frostbite, no permanent damage that I can see. She needs rest and regular meals, that's all. Your quick action likely saved her life, Gabe. Gabriel felt relief wash through him. Can I see her? In a moment. Sarah's getting her settled in the spare room. We'll keep her here for a few days until she's stronger. The doctor paused, studying Gabriel with sharp eyes. You want to tell me what really happened? I told you. I found her in the snow. And Gabriel sighed. He trusted Doc Morrison, had known him for years. She was running from her husband's brother, trying to claim her like property after her husband died. She'd rather have died than go back to him. The doctor's expression darkened. I see. Does Tom know about this? Not yet. I wanted to get her settled first, make sure she was safe. Good thinking. Come on, Sarah should have her ready by now. Gabriel followed the doctor down a short hallway to a small but comfortable room. Marianne was tucked into a real bed with clean sheets and a thick quilt, her hair spread across the pillow. She looked impossibly young and vulnerable, but she smiled when she saw Gabriel, and it transformed her whole face. Thank you, she said, for everything. You don't need to thank me. Gabriel approached the bed slowly, hat in his hands. You just need to rest and get strong. Everything else will work itself out. Will you come back to visit? The hope in her voice made his chest tight. Every day if you want me to, I'd like that. Sarah shooed both men from the room then, insisting Marianne needed sleep. Gabriel let himself be herded out, but not before catching one last glimpse of Marianne's face, peaceful in a way he suspected it hadn't been in years. Outside, the night was cold and clear, stars brilliant overhead. Gabriel stood for a moment, breathing in the sharp air, trying to process everything that had happened. 3 days ago, his life had been simple, predictable. Work the ranch, save his money, dream about his future. Now there was Marianne, and nothing felt simple anymore. He thought about her words in the snow, that quiet declaration that she wasn't worth saving. He thought about the 3 years she'd endured, the desperation that had driven her out into a blizzard to die. And he thought about the way she'd smiled at him just now, like maybe, just maybe, she was starting to believe she might have a future after all. Gabriel Sterling had always been a practical man, not given to flights of fancy or romantic notions. But as he walked back toward the ranch in the darkness, he couldn't shake the feeling that finding Marianne Jenkins in that snow had changed his life in ways he was only beginning to understand. The next morning, Gabriel was up before dawn, finishing his chores with unusual haste. The other ranch hands noticed and teased him about it, but he bore their ribbing with good humor. As soon as he could get away, he rode back into town, stopping at the general store to buy a few things. A warm shawl, some hard candies, a book of poetry he thought Marianne might like. Sarah Morrison answered his knock with a knowing smile. "She's in the kitchen having breakfast. Go on through." Gabriel found Marianne sitting at the kitchen table, wearing one of Sarah's dresses that had been altered to fit her smaller frame. She looked rested, the shadows under her eyes less pronounced, and she brightened when she saw him. "You came," she said, sounding surprised. "I said I would." He set his purchases on the table, suddenly self-conscious. "Thought you might need a few things." Marianne's eyes widened as she examined the shawl, running her fingers over the soft wool. "It's beautiful. You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. Stronger. Sarah's been feeding me every hour, I think. She's determined to put weight on me." Marianne smiled, and Gabriel noticed it came easier now, more natural. "Gabe, I need to talk to you about what happens next. I can't stay here forever. I need to find work, make my own way." "There's time for that. You need to recover first." "I don't have time. I don't have money. I can't impose on the Morrisons' hospitality forever." Gabriel leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "What kind of work did you do before?" "I can cook, clean, so I'm good with numbers. My mother taught me to read and write before she died." Marianne's expression grew distant. "She had plans for me, hoped I'd be a teacher someday. But then she got sick, and after she died, my father started drinking. The rest you know." "The school teacher here is getting old," Gabriel said slowly, an idea forming. "Miss Hutchins has been talking about retiring. Town's been trying to figure out who could take over. You'd need to pass a test with the territory board, but if you can read and write as well as you say, that shouldn't be a problem." Marianne stared at him. "You think they'd hire me?" "A woman with no references, no history. I think they'd hire someone qualified who wants the job, and I think you want it. I can see it in your face." She looked down at her hands, and he saw her blinking back tears. "My mother would have loved that, me as a teacher." "Then let's make it happen." Gabriel reached across the table, and this time Marianne took his hand without hesitation. "But first, we need to talk to Sheriff Reeves. Get your situation sorted out legal. Make sure you're protected if anyone comes looking for you." Marianne's fingers tightened on his. "I'm scared." "I know. But you're not alone anymore. You've got me, and I'm not going anywhere." They went to see Sheriff Reeves that afternoon. Tom Reeves was a tall, lean man in his early 50s with gray threading through his dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Marianne's story without interruption, his expression growing grimmer as she spoke. When she finished, he sat back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "That's a hard story, Miss Jenkins. I'm sorry you went through that. Now, legally speaking, your husband's brother has no claim on you whatsoever. You're a widow, free to make your own choices. If he tries to force you to do anything against your will, that's kidnapping, and I'll arrest him for it. But what if he has papers? What if he has something that says I owe him? Unless you sign something yourself. Any papers he has aren't worth the ink they're printed with. A dead man's debts don't transfer to his widow, and even if they did, a person can't be used as payment. That's slavery, and we fought a war over that not too long ago." Marianne seemed to sag with relief. "So I'm really free. You're really free." Tom's expression softened. "Where are you planning to stay, Miss Jenkins? I'm hoping to find work." Gabe mentioned there might be a teaching position available. Tom glanced at Gabriel with raised eyebrows, then back at Marianne. "That's so. Well, Miss Hutchins has been wanting to retire. Let me talk to the town council, see what can be arranged. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay with the Morrisons as long as you need." After they left the sheriff's office, Marianne turned to Gabriel with tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe it. I'm really free. After all this time, I'm really free." Gabriel pulled her into his arms without thinking, and she came willingly, pressing her face against his chest as she cried. He held her gently, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances. People passing on the street gave them curious looks, but he didn't care. All that mattered was the woman in his arms, finally releasing years of pain and fear. When she finally pulled back, wiping at her eyes, she gave him a watery smile. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to fall apart on you. You're allowed to fall apart. You've earned it." Gabriel brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Come on, let's get you back to the Morrisons. You need rest." Over the next 2 weeks, Gabriel visited Marianne every day. Sometimes they talked, sharing stories about their lives. She told him about her mother, about the happy years before sickness took her. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 18, about drifting west and finding work on the Triple Bar. Other times they simply existed together in comfortable silence. Gabriel would read to her from the poetry book he'd bought, or they'd sit on the Morrisons' porch when the weather warmed slightly, watching the town go about its business. Gabriel found himself thinking about her constantly, even when he was working. The way she laughed, rare but genuine. The way she was slowly coming back to life, like a flower unfurling after a long winter. The way she looked at him sometimes, with warmth and trust, and something else he was afraid to name. He knew he was falling in love with her. Had probably been falling since the moment he'd found her in the snow. It terrified him because he didn't know if she could feel the same way, if she'd even want to after everything she'd been through. But he couldn't seem to stop himself, couldn't seem to guard his heart the way he knew he should. One afternoon, about 3 weeks after he'd found her, Gabriel arrived at the Morrisons to find Marianne waiting on the porch wearing the shawl he'd bought her. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, her eyes bright, and she practically bounced with excitement. "What's got you so happy?" he asked, climbing the steps to join her. "Tom Reeves came by this morning. The town council approved my application to take over the teaching position. I start in 2 weeks, once Miss Hutchins has had time to show me everything." She grabbed his hands, squeezing hard. "I'm going to be a teacher, Gabe, a real teacher." Gabriel couldn't help himself. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, they were standing close, his hands still on her waist, her hands on his shoulders. The laughter faded as they looked at each other, and Gabriel felt the air between them change, become charged with something electric. "Marianne," he said quietly, seriously. "I need to tell you something." "What?" "I care about you. More than I should, probably, given how little time we've known each other. But I can't help it. When I'm not with you, I'm thinking about you. When I am with you, I don't want to leave. I know you've been through hell, and I know the last thing you probably want is another man making demands, but I needed you to know how I feel." Marianne's honey-colored eyes searched his face, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "Gabe, I'm broken. You saw what I tried to do out there in the snow. I gave up. I don't know if I can be what you need. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference." He raised one hand to cup her cheek, his touch gentle. "And I don't need you to be anything other than who you are. I just need you to give us a chance. Give me a chance to show you what it's like when someone loves you the way you deserve to be loved." "Love." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Love," he confirmed. "I love you, Marianne Jenkins. I think I started loving you the moment you opened your eyes in that snow, and I saw how much fight you still had in you, even when you thought you'd given up." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I didn't think I could feel this way, didn't think I had it in me anymore. But I do. I love you, Gabriel Sterling." He kissed her then, soft and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and kissed him back with a passion that took his breath away. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me." Marianne laughed, the sound bright and joyful. "That's quite a leap from our first kiss. I'm a decisive man. I know what I want, and I want you. I want to build that ranch I've been dreaming about, and I want you beside me while I do it. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep next to you every night. I want everything, Marianne, but only if you want it too." She pulled back to look at him, her expression serious now. "I want it. More than I've ever wanted anything. But Gabe, you need to understand that I might not be easy to live with. I have nightmares. I flinch at loud noises. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night sure that he's coming for me, even though I know he's dead. Then I'll hold you through the nightmares. I'll be patient with the flinching. I'll remind you every single day that you're safe and loved and free. Marianne, I see you. Not the broken parts, not the scared parts, but the strong, brave, beautiful woman who survived things that would have destroyed a lesser person. That's who I'm asking to marry me." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in El Dorado Canyon. Marianne wore a simple dress that Sarah Morrison had helped her make, pale blue with white lace at the collar. Gabriel wore his Sunday best, his hair neatly trimmed, his boots polished to a shine. The whole town turned out for the ceremony, these people who'd welcomed Marianne without question, who'd given her a chance to start over. Doc Morrison walked Marianne down the aisle since she had no father to do it. Sarah cried happy tears in the front row. Sheriff Reeves stood as Gabriel's best man, and Miss Hutchins, the retiring schoolteacher, stood as Marianne's witness when the preacher asked if anyone objected to the union. Gabriel tensed, half expecting Marianne's husband's brother to burst through the doors. But the church remained quiet, and he breathed easier. "Do you, Gabriel Sterling, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Gabriel said firmly, his eyes never leaving Marianne's face. "And do you, Marianne Jenkins, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do," Marianne said, her voice clear and strong, no hesitation. "Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I now pronounce you man and wife." You may kiss your bride." Gabriel cupped Marianne's face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, pouring all his love and promise into that single moment. The church erupted in applause and cheers, but he barely heard it. All that existed was Marianne, his wife, his love, his future. They held a small reception at the hotel, paid for by the ranch hands who'd pooled their money together as a wedding gift. There was food and drink and dancing, and Gabriel held Marianne close as they swayed to the music, both of them grinning like fools. "Happy?" he asked, his lips close to her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she replied. "Sometimes I think I'm going to wake up and this will all have been a dream, that I'm still lying in that snow, dying. You're not. This is real, I'm real, and I'm never letting you go." That night, Gabriel carried Marianne over the threshold of the small house he'd been renting on the edge of town. It wasn't much, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was theirs. He set her down carefully, suddenly nervous despite everything they'd been through together. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for," he said quietly. "I can sleep on the floor or I can just hold you, whatever you need." Marianne looked at him with eyes full of love. "I'm ready. I trust you, Gabe. You've shown me nothing but kindness and patience. You've given me back my life. I want this. I want you." He made love to her slowly, gently, erasing the memories of rough hands and selfish demands with tender touches and whispered words of love. Afterward, she cried again, but these were healing tears, releasing the last of the pain she'd carried for so long. "I love you," she said, curled against his chest. "Thank you for disagreeing with me that day. Thank you for thinking I was worth saving." Gabriel kissed her forehead, holding her close. "You'll always be worth saving, but the truth is, I think you saved me just as much as I saved you." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following months. Marianne took over the schoolhouse, teaching children ranging from 6 to 14. She loved it, came home every afternoon bubbling with stories about her students, their progress, their antics. Gabriel continued working at the Triple Bar, but now he had something to come home to, someone to share his days with. They saved money religiously, putting every spare penny toward the ranch Gabriel still dreamed about. Marianne proved to be excellent with finances, stretching their money further than Gabriel had thought possible. She kept their small house immaculate, cooked meals that made his mouth water, and filled their home with love and laughter. The nightmares came sometimes, as she'd warned him they would. Gabriel would wake to find her thrashing, crying out in her sleep. He'd gather her close, murmuring reassurances until she woke, disoriented and scared. Then he'd hold her until she fell back asleep, his presence a shield against the darkness of her past. Spring came, and with it the wildflowers Gabriel had promised her. He took her riding through the canyon on his days off, showing her the land he hoped to buy. They'd spread a blanket in the tall grass and lie there for hours, watching clouds drift overhead, talking about their future. "I want children," Marianne said one afternoon, propped on her elbow beside him. "I never thought I would after everything, but I do. I want to fill that ranch house you're always talking about with children and laughter." Gabriel pulled her down for a kiss, his heart full to bursting. "Then we'll have children, as many as you want. I'm thinking 3, 2 boys and a girl maybe, or 2 girls and a boy, I'm not particular." "Whatever we get, we'll love them," Gabriel promised. In July, Marianne discovered she was pregnant. She told Gabriel over dinner, setting down her fork and looking at him with nervous excitement. "I'm with child." Gabriel stared at her for a moment, the words taking time to sink in. Then he was out of his chair, pulling her up into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby," she confirmed, laughing with him. He set her down gently, suddenly worried. "Are you all right? Should you be working? Should you be doing anything? I'm pregnant, not made of glass, Marianne said, amused. Doc Morrison says I'm healthy, the baby's healthy. Everything's fine. We need to get that ranch now, Gabriel said, his mind already racing. I want our child born in our own home on our own land. I've saved almost enough for the down payment. I'll talk to the bank tomorrow. The next day, Gabriel met with the banker in El Dorado Canyon. He had enough for a substantial down payment on the land he'd been eyeing, and his reputation as a hard worker made him a good risk for a loan. They shook hands on the deal, and just like that, Gabriel Sterling became a landowner. The property consisted of 300 acres of good grazing land with a creek running through it. There was a small cabin already built, rough but sturdy, which would serve as their home until Gabriel could build something better. He spent every spare moment that summer fixing up the cabin, making it comfortable for Marianne and the baby. Marianne continued teaching through the fall, only stopping when she was 7 months along and starting to find it difficult to stand for long periods. The town women threw her a party, showering her with gifts for the baby. Clothes and blankets and toys, all made with love and care. Their son was born on a cold January night, almost exactly 1 year after Gabriel had found Marianne in the snow. The labor was long and difficult, and Gabriel paced the main room of their cabin while Doc Morrison and Sarah tended to Marianne in the bedroom. Every cry of pain from her tore at his heart, made him wish he could take it all on himself. But finally, after hours that felt like days, he heard a new sound, a baby's cry, strong and healthy. Doc Morrison emerged from the bedroom, grinning. "You have a son, Gabe, healthy boy with good lungs, and your wife is fine, tired but fine. You can go see them." Gabriel entered the bedroom on shaky legs. Marianne lay in their bed, sweaty and exhausted but more beautiful than he'd ever seen her. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked up at Gabriel with tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Gabriel approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. He sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby's face, red and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. The baby's eyes were closed, his little fists waving in the air. "He's beautiful," Gabriel whispered, "just like his mother. I was thinking we could name him George after my father, the good man he was before the drinking, before everything went wrong. Give the name a fresh start like we did." "George Sterling," Gabriel said, trying it out. "I like it. It's strong." He stayed beside them as Marianne nursed the baby, marveling at how natural she was with him, how much love shone from her face. This woman who'd thought she wasn't worth saving was now the center of a family, a mother, a teacher, beloved by an entire community. She'd come so far from that broken woman in the snow, had reclaimed her life and her future with courage and grace. As winter gave way to spring, George grew plump and healthy. Marianne proved to be an excellent mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Gabriel worked harder than ever, building up their ranch, buying cattle, making plans for the future. The brand he chose was simple, a snowflake inside a circle, a reminder of where they'd started, of the day that had changed both their lives. Summer brought new challenges. A group of men rode onto their property one afternoon while Gabriel was out checking fences. Marianne was in the cabin with George when she heard horses approaching. She looked out the window and felt her blood turn to ice. Leading the group was her husband's brother, Walter Haynes. She grabbed George, holding him close, and reached for the rifle Gabriel kept by the door. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to load it. When Walter knocked on the door, she didn't answer. "Marianne, I know you're in there," Walter called. "Open up. We need to talk." "Go away," she shouted back, trying to keep her voice steady. "You have no business here. You're my business. You ran off, left debts unpaid. I've come to collect." I don't owe you anything. Sheriff Reeves said so. You have no legal claim on me. We'll see about that. Open this door or I'll break it down. Marianne stepped back, raising the rifle with one hand while clutching George with the other. You break that door down and I'll shoot you. I swear it. There was silence outside, then Walter's voice again, this time with an edge of anger. You've got yourself quite the setup here. New husband, new baby, new life. But you don't deserve any of it. You're trash, Marianne. My brother should have beaten the worthlessness out of you while he had the chance. Each word was designed to hurt, to undermine, to make her believe she was nothing again. But they didn't work. Not anymore, because Gabriel had taught her differently. He'd shown her every day for over a year that she was valuable, lovable, worth everything. She'd built a life here, built a family, and she'd be damned if she'd let Walter Haynes take it away. The only worthless person here is you, she called back. A man who thinks he can own a woman like property. My husband is Gabriel Sterling, and when he gets back, he's going to throw you off our land. The law is on our side, not yours. She heard muttering outside, the men with Walter arguing among themselves. Then, blessed relief, she heard another sound. More horses, approaching fast. Gabriel's voice rang out, followed by Sheriff Reeves and several ranch hands from the triple bar. You need to leave, Gabriel said, his voice hard as iron. Now. This is a private matter, Walter blustered. Between family. She's not your family. She's my wife, and this is my land, and you're trespassing. You've got two choices. Leave on your own, or the sheriff here can arrest you and your friends for harassment and trespassing. Tom Reeves spoke up. I explained this to you already when you came asking questions in town, Haynes. Mrs. Sterling owes you nothing. You have no claim on her. If I see you on this property again, or if you try to contact her in any way, I will arrest you. Have I made myself clear? More muttering, then the sound of horses turning around. Gabriel stayed where he was until the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely. Then he was at the door, calling Marianne's name. She opened it with shaking hands, still holding George and the rifle. Gabriel took one look at her face and pulled both of them into his arms. It's all right. He's gone. I've got you. Marianne pressed her face against his chest, feeling the tension drain from her body. I was so scared, not for me but for George. What if they'd hurt him? They didn't. You protected him. Gabriel kissed her forehead, then George's. You were so brave. I told him I'd shoot him if he broke down the door, and I meant it. Gabriel pulled back to look at her, a hint of pride in his eyes. I believe it. That's my fierce wife. Sheriff Reeves rode back the next day to tell them Walter Haynes had left town, heading back east. He'd asked around, made some inquiries, and apparently Walter had outstanding warrants for theft and assault in Missouri. I sent word to the authorities there. If he's smart, he'll keep running and never look back. He won't be bothering you again. Life returned to normal after that, though Gabriel made sure someone was always nearby when he had to be away from the cabin. Summer faded into fall, and George took his first steps. Marianne resumed teaching when school started, bringing George with her since he was too young to be left. The children adored him, fighting over who got to help watch him during recess. Winter came again, that second winter of their marriage, and one snowy afternoon Gabriel bundled Marianne and George into the wagon and drove them out to a familiar spot. The place where he'd found her, marked now by a small cairn of stones he'd built. Why are we here? Marianne asked, confused. Gabriel climbed down and helped her out, then retrieved George from the back. He stood before the cairn, his family beside him. 2 years ago, I found you here. 2 years ago, your life ended and began again in the same moment. I wanted to come back, to remember, to honor what you survived. Marianne looked at the cairn, then at the snow-covered landscape around them. It looked peaceful now, serene, nothing like the desperate place it had been in her memories. "I'm not that person anymore." "No, you're not. You're stronger, happier, free." Gabriel took her hand. "I wanted you to see that, wanted you to stand here with me and our son and know how far you've come." Tears froze on Marianne's cheeks as she looked at him. "I love you. I don't think I say that enough. You show me every day." He kissed her softly. "Come on, let's go home." 3 years passed in a blur of work and love and growth. The ranch prospered, Gabriel's hard work and skill paying off in healthy cattle and good profits. They built a proper house, 2 stories with 4 bedrooms and a wide porch that looked out over the canyon. Marianne taught each school year, her reputation as an excellent teacher growing throughout the territory. George grew into a bright, active boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's honey-colored hair. He loved the ranch, loved helping Gabriel with the cattle, loved riding his small pony through the fields. He was gentle and kind, traits both his parents encouraged, but he also had a stubborn streak that could try anyone's patience. When George was 4, Marianne found herself pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl on a warm spring morning. They named her Mary, after Marianne's mother, and she had her father's brown hair and her mother's eyes. 2 years after Mary came another boy whom they named Samuel. He was quieter than George had been, more thoughtful but no less loved. Their house was full now, full of children and noise and the kind of chaos that came with a growing family. Gabriel looked at his life sometimes with a sense of wonder. From a poor farm boy to a successful rancher with a wife he adored and 3 healthy children. It felt like more than he deserved, like somehow he'd been given someone else's blessings by mistake. But Marianne always laughed when he said such things. "You earned this," she'd tell him. "You worked for it, fought for it, built it with your own hands. And you saved a woman who thought she had nothing left to live for. If anyone deserves happiness, it's you." One evening when Gabriel was 41 and Marianne was 38, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the canyon walls gold and red. The children were inside, George now 16 and helping more and more with the ranch, Mary 12 and already showing signs of her mother's intelligence, Samuel 10 and content with his books and his thoughts. "You ever think about that day?" Gabriel asked. "The day I found you?" "Sometimes," Marianne admitted, "but it feels like it happened to someone else, like a story I heard rather than something I lived through. You were so brave. Even when you'd given up, there was still fight in you. I saw it." Marianne leaned against his shoulder and he wrapped his arm around her. "You taught me to fight again, taught me that I was worth fighting for. I would have died out there if not for you." "And I would have lived a half-life if not for you," Gabriel replied. "You gave me purpose beyond just existing. You gave me love and family and a reason to build something that would last." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade. Inside, they could hear the children laughing about something, the sound drifting out through the open windows. This was what happiness sounded like, Gabriel thought. This right here. "I want to show you something," he said suddenly, standing and offering her his hand. Intrigued, Marianne let him lead her down off the porch and toward the barn. Inside, in the back corner, was a chest she'd never seen before. Gabriel opened it, revealing papers and documents neatly organized. "This is everything," he said. "Deed to the land, bills of sale for the cattle, bank records, everything. I've been organizing it, making sure it's all in order." He pulled out a specific document and handed it to her. "This is most important." Marianne unfolded it and read quickly, her eyes widening. "You put the ranch in my name, and the children's. If anything happens to me, I want you protected. I want you to never again be in a position where someone can claim ownership over you or what's yours." This ranch is as much yours as it is mine. More because without you, I never would have had the courage to build it in the first place." She threw her arms around him, holding him tight. "Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not allowed to leave me." "I'm not planning on it," Gabriel assured her. "But I needed you to know, needed you to feel secure." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and Marianne thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate girl who'd walked into a blizzard to die, to this woman with a home and a family and a future brighter than she'd ever imagined possible. It had taken years to heal, years to stop flinching at sudden movements, years to believe she truly was safe and loved. But she'd done it. They'd done it together. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges and joys. George took over more of the ranch work as Gabriel's body began to feel the effects of decades of hard labor. He was a capable young man, responsible and fair, and Gabriel was proud of the person he'd become. Mary followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a teacher herself in a neighboring town. She visited often, bringing with her the young man she was courting, a banker's son with kind eyes and a quick wit. Gabriel approved, having learned to read people well over the years. Samuel surprised them all by declaring his intention to become a doctor. He left for medical school back east, writing long letters home about his studies. Marianne cried when he left, but they were proud tears, happy tears. When Gabriel was 54, he woke one morning to find his joints stiff and his back aching more than usual. Doc Morrison, now retired and replaced by a younger doctor, examined him and declared it arthritis, a natural consequence of years of hard work. Nothing serious, just the body getting older. Marianne, now 51, had silver threading through her dark hair and fine lines around her eyes from years of smiling. To Gabriel, she was more beautiful than ever. They'd grown old together, their lives intertwined so completely it was impossible to imagine one without the other. On a warm June evening, Gabriel and Marianne celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. George threw them a party at the ranch house, inviting everyone from miles around. The house overflowed with friends and family, all coming to celebrate a love story that had become legendary in El Dorado Canyon. Sheriff Tom Reeves, now retired himself and white-haired, raised a toast. To the Sterlings, who proved that love can bloom even in the harshest winter. May you have many more years together. Everyone drank to that, and Gabriel pulled Marianne close, kissing her to the accompaniment of cheers and applause. 25 years, he murmured against her lips. Feels like forever and no time at all. Here's to 25 more, Marianne replied. And they got those years and more. They watched Mary marry her banker and give them 3 grandchildren. They celebrated when Samuel graduated from medical school and returned to Wyoming to open a practice in a growing town south of El Dorado Canyon. They saw George marry a rancher's daughter and start his own family, building a house on the far edge of their land. The ranch continued to prosper under George's management, expanding until it was one of the largest in the territory. Gabriel took pride in watching his son succeed, in knowing that what he'd built would continue long after he was gone. Wyoming achieved statehood in 1890, and Gabriel and Marianne attended the celebrations in Cheyenne. They held hands through the speeches and the fireworks. 2 people who'd helped build this place, who'd put down roots and raised a family and contributed to their community. On a cold January morning in 1903, Gabriel woke before dawn as he always did. He lay in bed beside Marianne, listening to her breathe, and felt a deep contentment settle over him. He was 70 years old, had lived a life fuller and richer than he'd ever imagined possible. He'd loved and been loved in return. He'd raised good children who'd become good adults. He'd built something that would last, but more than any of that, he'd saved a life and had his own saved in return. Marianne stirred beside him, opening her eyes. Even after all these years, the first thing she did each morning was smile at him. "Good morning," she murmured. "Good morning, love." Gabriel pulled her close and she nestled against him with the ease of long practice. "You know what day it is? January 15th. Why, 25 years ago today I found you in the snow." Marianne was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. 25 years. It really has been a lifetime, hasn't it? The best lifetime. Gabriel kissed the top of her head. "I was just lying here thinking about how different things could have been. If I'd taken a different route that day, if I'd been an hour earlier or later, if you'd been buried just a little deeper in that snow. But you didn't and I wasn't, and here we are." Marianne propped herself up to look at him. "Do you have any regrets?" "Not a single one." "You?" She smiled, that same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago. "Only that I wasted so much time before I met you, but I suppose those hard years made me appreciate the good ones more." They lay there as dawn light began to filter through the curtains, talking quietly about their children, their grandchildren, their life together. When they finally rose and dressed, joining the family for breakfast, Gabriel looked around the table at the people gathered there and felt his heart swell with gratitude. This was what he'd saved that day in the snow. Not just Marianne's life, but all of this. Every laugh, every meal, every moment of joy. The children who wouldn't have been born, the grandchildren who wouldn't exist. The love that filled this house and spilled out into the world. He disagreed with her when she'd said she wasn't worth saving, and 25 years later, he'd never been more certain that he'd been right. The years continued their steady march. Gabriel and Marianne grew older, their bodies slowing but their minds and hearts still sharp. They spent long afternoons on their porch, watching the canyon change with the seasons, talking or sitting in comfortable silence. When Gabriel was 78, his heart began to give him trouble. The doctor prescribed rest, no excitement, an easy life. Gabriel followed the orders as best he could, but it was hard for a man used to action to sit still. Marianne watched over him like a hawk, scolding him when he tried to do too much, holding him when the chest pains came. One evening in late summer, they sat on the porch as they always did. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Gabriel felt tired, more tired than he'd ever been, but content. "So content, Marianne," he said quietly. "I need to tell you something." She looked at him and he saw the fear flash across her face. She knew. She'd always been able to read him. "Don't," she said. "Don't say goodbye. I have to. Because I need you to know that these 45 years with you have been the greatest gift of my life. You made me better than I was, loved me more than I deserved, gave me a family and a home and a purpose. I don't have words for how grateful I am." Tears streamed down her face. "You saved my life. You saved mine right back." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "Promise me something, anything. Promise me you'll keep living, really living, not just existing. You did that once before, gave up on life, and I can't bear the thought of you doing it again. Promise me." "I promise," Marianne whispered, "but only if you promise to fight, to stay with me as long as you can." "I'll fight," Gabriel promised, "as long as I can." He kept that promise for another 3 years. 3 years of gradual decline, his body failing him bit by bit while his mind remained clear. Marianne never left his side, sleeping in a chair beside their bed when he could no longer climb the stairs, reading to him, talking to him, loving him until the very end. Gabriel Sterling died on a spring morning in 1906, surrounded by his family. His last words were to Marianne, "Thank you for being worth saving." Marianne mourned him deeply, but didn't break her promise. She continued living in the house they'd built, surrounded by children and grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. She told them all the story of how she and Gabriel had met, of the day he'd found her in the snow and refused to let her die. "He taught me something important that day," she'd say. "He taught me that we don't always see our own worth, but that doesn't mean it isn't there. He saw value in me when I saw none in myself, and he loved me until I could see it too." Marianne lived to be 93 years old, sharp and engaged with life until the very end. When she finally died peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by 3 generations of family, they buried her beside Gabriel on a hill overlooking the canyon they'd both loved. The ranch continued through the generations, the Sterling name becoming synonymous with quality cattle and fair dealing throughout Wyoming. Each new generation heard the story of Gabriel and Marianne, of a love that had bloomed in the harshest winter and lasted a lifetime. And on a small hill near where the original cabin had stood, a monument was erected. It was simple, just a stone marker, but the words carved into it told a story. Here, in the winter of 1878, Gabriel Sterling found Marianne Jenkins and refused to let her die. From that moment came a love that built a family, a ranch, and a legacy that continues today. May we all be so fortunate as to find someone who sees our worth when we cannot see it ourselves. Every year on January 15th, family members would gather at that monument, no matter the weather, to remember and to honor the beginning of their family's story. They'd tell the tale again, making sure it was never forgotten, making sure every child understood where they came from and the power of love to transform lives. Because Gabriel had been right all those years ago. Marianne Jenkins had been worth saving, worth fighting for, worth everything. And together, they'd built something that would last long after they were both gone, a testament to the truth that love, real love, could overcome even the darkest despair and coldest winter. The canyon walls still glowed red and gold at sunset, just as they had that first day Gabriel brought Marianne there. The creek still rang clear and cold, never dry. The wildflowers still bloomed every spring, purple and yellow and white, covering the hills in color. And if you stood very still on certain winter evenings, when the snow fell soft and quiet, you could almost feel them there still. Gabriel and Marianne, 2 souls who'd found each other against all odds, whose love had defied death and time, whose story would be told as long as the Sterling name endured in Wyoming. It was a love story for the ages, born in a moment of compassion, nurtured through patience and commitment, and lasting not just a lifetime but beyond, into eternity. A reminder that sometimes the best thing we can do is refuse to accept when someone says they're not worth saving, because we might be the only person who can see the truth they're too hurt to see themselves. And in the end, that's exactly what love is, seeing someone's worth even when they cannot, and choosing them anyway, choosing them always, until the very last breath and beyond.